Okay, cool. So we've just kicked off the recording. So we're gonna talk about quite a few different things today, but the first thing I want to talk about is the APIs that OpenAI has available, right? I think everyone here knows that OpenAI is a company that made ChatGPT, which is cool. You can use it for free, or you can get the $20 a month uh, subscription, like for personal use. And I think everyone knows that they're trying to roll out features for businesses, like OpenAI for business, to help companies do things with AI. And there's a lot of debate if those are helpful or not. And if OpenAI is going to be a successful company, they have much bigger bills than they have revenue coming in. I think they have like 20 billion in revenue a year, and they have like over the next like 3 years, they owe companies like $1 trillion in like cloud bills and stuff like that. So they're trying to figure out how to make money. These tools they're trying to build for folks have a few underlying APIs that you can use as well. And I want us to see, like I have like a tool out like in the world that's working, that's using OpenAI's APIs. So we can look at that here in a bit. But first, I want to go through these slides to make sure we understand what these different things do. And these are OpenAI specific, but other companies like Google's Gemini and such have quickly catching up, and some people say surpass them in making essentially a one-to-one of these APIs, right? And this is just good knowledge for us to have in terms of understanding how these AI companies are going from just chat tools to like actual tools, like production use cases. Okay. So let's go through them here. Cool. Okay, so we just talked about that. Okay, so I think we already talked about embeddings last time. Can somebody tell me, feel free to come off mute or just put it in the chat. Can somebody tell me what is a vector store? Has anyone like heard that term? Someone could like just tell me like what that is.
Can you repeat that question one more time? Sorry.
Yeah, what is a vector store? Is anyone familiar with that concept in computer science? Like I said, I think we talked about embeddings last time, but not about vector stores. What's the vector store?
It's basically where the tokens are like the way the tokens are stored in that database. It's some space in high-dimensional space, and unless like relative or not relative like database, it's everything stored in like vectors way.
Yeah, that sounds pretty good. Yeah, so like a vector, yeah, it's just like a long, it's like numbers, right? It's like numerical representation of real words or tokens, right? Like we talked about last time. So OpenAI has different embedding models that we'll look at that essentially can store these vectors or embed these vectors in what's called a vector database, right? So it's just super efficient way to store things, right? And like I said, it's a numerical representation of actual words, right? So let's say you have like a string of text, like I love cats, right? That could be a vector, or it's like I adore kittens, right? That could be vector B, right? And because these phrases have very close semantic meaning, they'll be very close, like physical proximity to each other in vector space. Okay, like the space in the vector store, right? Um, so that leads us to another concept here called semantic search. Is anybody familiar with that concept of semantic search? I know there's a definition on the screen, but just like in your own words, or if you're familiar with that, just curious.
It's when you store like look for some, I don't know, present, for example, and you actually ask like present and like you give some like results, even so like present not in the name of this product, but something suggests that present relate to these objects or products.
Yeah, that sounds good. Does anybody else wanna share? Either in the chat or out loud? Okay, all good. So yeah, so semantic search, right? This is really different than a traditional database search. Okay. Semantic search is, as the name implies, is a particular search technique, right? And with this, we're focusing on meaning and intent, okay? Not just the exact keywords, right? Because we talked about earlier, the vector store is it's indexing based on semantic meaning, right? Like I love cats, I adore kittens. Like those are have close semantic meaning, right? So traditional search is saying like, hey, does this document contain these words? Right? Like you're searching for like keywords, maybe, right? Just as an example of like a traditional database search. But with semantic search, you're saying, hey, in this document, are there things that have the same idea, right? So another example is like car repair and automobile maintenance. Those things are very different keywords, just literally different words in the English language, but they have very similar semantic search, right? Fixing vehicles, engine services, right? Those are all similar semantics, right? So for chatbots, or maybe you've heard of RAG systems, we'll talk about that. Um, that's very help. That's like how these things work, right? And this is particularly helpful for like legal purposes, right? Like the tool I released is for like legal, like for lawyers to use, right? Super helpful for that. Like we'll walk through that. So yeah, that is that. Um, so yeah, it's just very, very helpful for organizing data. Okay. Organizing your knowledge based on ideas. It's kind of like a newer concept with the coming of AI in the past couple of years. That's really, really, really helpful and really important to be aware of. Okay. Um, so we talked about embeddings a little bit yesterday, but just want to put this definition here on the screen just to make sure we have that down. Embeddings is a numerical representation of text that capture semantic meaning. Okay. So we can, as we say here, we can search by intent rather than exact phrases. Okay. Understand the relationships between different concepts. Cool. Okay. So the first API I want to talk about is the files API. Okay. And it may be helpful instead of just going to what slides, we can just go to OpenAI documentation, right? So if we actually go to OpenAI's website, right? I'm not sure if anyone's looked at this before. If anyone has, they can let me know in the chat. But in the OpenAI documentation, they have all their APIs, right? And like what they do and such. So when you're thinking about, for example, like projects on your resume, right? Or if you want to use AI in your internship or job or just be impressive, it's not just like, oh yeah, let me make a dancing snowman like we did yesterday in VO3, right? Like you can actually use this to programmatically to improve your apps, right? So the first one I want to talk about is, like I said, the files API, right? So when we think about it's like, hey, I see in the chat some people have for Gemini. Okay, but not OpenAI. Okay, cool, cool, cool. So it is good to compare, right? It's good to be familiar with multiple so you don't get sucked into one ecosystem without really evaluating what's the best. Like just for personal context of myself, like I've worked at Google, Microsoft, and Amazon. And at all three of these places, there's people who are like just super obsessed with the ecosystem, particularly at Microsoft. There's people who like just never use anything but Azure, and they just think Azure is like the best thing on the planet. But they just use AWS for a second, they might they might change their mind. So yeah, I want you to not just get sucked in like, oh, like Claude is the best or oh, Gemini is the best. Like I want you to like look at all of them and we'll do that throughout the we'll use all of them in the projects we have for this class. But it's good to try all of them and just see what you like the best, actually see what get opinionated about what you feel is the best, and then of course, just what you like. You can have opinions on documentation. Like some people really like Gemini's documentation. Some people really like Amazon's documentation in terms of like cloud provider. So same thing here for these AI providers. I want you to get familiar with all of them, right? Okay. So when we think about it's like, hey, I want my AI project to have these files, right? I want the AI to be aware of these files, right? Um, they have a files API where you can upload files, right? Crazy. Um, so that's just what I'm going through here, right? So in general, at the highest level, just English files like PDF, text, or notes or whatever. Um, but whatever it is, whatever format, right? Like there's a world before PDFs existed, for example. Maybe in the future there'd be some new file format. It doesn't really matter. In general, files are just source material, right? As we see in the text here. So they just contain knowledge. But this knowledge, um, without putting it into some sort of system, right? Like a vector store, for example, via maybe Files API, for example, OpenAI's File API, then they're not searchable or queryable by AI, right? So you want to turn this text into embeddings and put it in a vector store, right? Um, I'm not going to do the live demonstration yet. We'll do that in a bit. Um, all right, maybe I will do that now. But let me see. Um, okay, I will do that. I'll do that in a sec. Um, okay. Yeah, I do. I'll show you I'll show you the project I made. And then I want us right here in class, right? Obviously, this class for like an hour and a half, very short. So we don't have like a ton of time. But what I'm a big purpose of this class, what I want to try to do is be like a forcer function for you all to actually use this stuff. So, I don't want to just endlessly drone on for hours and hours of slides. I want to like show you like a real example of how this works. And then I want to, I can't make you do anything, of course, but try to be a forcer function for you to actually like play with this stuff. So I'll show you the app I made and the code for it. And then I would love if we could take some time, maybe like 15 minutes it sounds like most folks have not used OpenAI's APIs before to actually go into OpenAI's platform, get an API key, and actually just do like some quick vibe coding to load a file into a vector database. That would be that'd be ideal. Um, but let me see if there's anything else in here I want to talk about first. No. Okay, cool. Okay, so I'm gonna pause the recording for 1 second, and then I'm gonna pull up that project.